In this edition of Garden Talk with the Tulsa Master Gardeners, we talk about how to get rid of insects that came indoors with your plants, a small pine that might be great for your landscape, and what you should be doing now to prepare for the next garden season. Welcome to Garden Talk.
All right, welcome back. This is episode 6 of the Master Gardener podcast here in Tulsa, here with Brian Jervis.
Number 6, that's awesome.
Myself, and we're glad you're here. We think we got some interesting, of course it's winter. We're towards the end of November. There's not a whole lot going on out in the garden, but what you can do, you can watch our podcast to get ready for next year. One thing we're doing, we've got the big episodes that we do, which are about a half hour long, but we're cutting out individual segments like we do on crepe myrtle bark scale. It's like a 10-minute thing on crepe myrtle bark scale. Mm-hmm. All these topics we'll break out in individual segments. So if you go to YouTube, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can see all the big episodes, but then you can also see all the breakouts, which we have on our website as well. But
yeah, it's working. When we first started, we didn't really know how long to do this for, and our first few episodes are in the 50-minute range, and then I think the last one we recorded was about 25-30 minutes. So in that, we've kind of had all these sections that we've had, whether it's Pest of the Week or Plant of the Week, that you're doing a great job breaking them out. So if you don't have time to go watch the whole thing, you can pull out different subjents that you like. Our moles and gopher ones have been pretty popular.
Moles and gophers, number one viewed.
Number one, everybody has those problems, right. But go to Tulsa Master Gardener YouTube channel and you hit subscribe, and I think it'll send you push notifications when you put new ones out. But there's a lot of different ways we're going to be doing this, and as always, if you have questions, go send them to us. We'll try to use them and at least get your questions answered. But we think winter time. We think it's just kind of we don't want to garden a lot now. But there's a lot of things we could be doing, and that's kind of what this episode we're going to be looking at. I think you brought some tools for later on to show. So there are a few things that are happening. That's happening in our gardens, and then things that we need to start thinking about in our gardens for next spring. So not quite the dead of winter, but we're getting close, but there's a lot of things to be talking about. So
right, which brings up usually we have a Pest of the Week segment. This time of year we've got, I guess this should really be Pests of the Week, because what all of us have done, most of us have done, is we've brought our tropicals and things that we had out on the patio or somewhere in the yard indoors so they can survive through the winter. But when we do that, we can tend to bring all the pests that were on those plants indoors as well.
That's right. So we've had them in a house. We've probably brought them in around the 1st of November. That was kind of our first big freeze. I think we got down to 25, 26 in locations. So if you didn't bring them in before that, you don't have to worry about it now. But we've brought them in, and we're in the middle of November now. So I think they've kind of settled in a little. You took them into the harsh, the conditions outside, which were decent, brought them into the harsh indoor conditions that are a little different. So the insects probably will be moving around a little bit if they're spider mites or aphids or mealy bugs. You'll start noticing more and more. But they're kind of starting to move a little bit if they are mobile, insect-wise.
And you've invited them into your home.
Yep, you brought them into warm areas.
So, one of those you might notice would be like this. This is spider mite damage. There's kind of like this sandblasted look on the leaves. That's from their piercing sucking, right? They suck the juices out of there, and they're these little guys here. They're kind of micro. They're hard to see.
They are hard to see.
The damage.
So they're pretty mobile. They're kind of like an aphid, and we think they're not that mobile. We can usually spray them with a stream of water. They can fall off and get, but they're mobile compared to like a mealybug or something that is attached to like a scale where they're not going to be mobile. So if you start seeing little creepy crawlies around the plant or around the pot, or even on the leaves, more likely are seeing an aphid or a spider mite that you probably will be noticing. I don't think they're doing a lot of damage to the plants. From the plant standpoint, we don't have to worry too awful much.
Well, they're kind of dormant.
They're kind of just sitting there. Right. But Tom's indoor plants are different from mine. I have like ZZ plants and more of a traditional indoor plants that that you bring inside. That I'll take outside. I don't leave any indoor plants inside during the summer. So I'll take everything outside and then bring everything back in that I want to save. I I think you're referring to like your hibiscus or other Persian shield ferns that you don't want to freeze out, so you're going to bring inside. So those plants, I didn't notice a lot of pests on mine when I brought them in, but I do again have the traditional corn plants, your ivies, your things like that, that don't get a lot of pests per se. You're talking about hibiscus. They tend to attract a lot of different things to them.
Right.
So
we brought them into our house. Keep our eyes out for activity, but then control. It's not a harsh control.
It's not. I mean, we're still talking about oils. Insecticidal soaps, neem oils, kind of some dormant oils.
Safe, organic.
Yeah, soft insecticides that aren't going to hurt a lot of things. If we bring them inside the house, they're not going to harm us by any means. So,
which is a concern if we got little kids and pets and stuff. We don't want them out there.
Anything like that. So, I mean, just depends if you're seeing a lot. You see the crawlies, or you start seeing some leaf drop that, again, is normal bringing these plants outside in, but you start inspecting and start seeing some white cottony scale or some mealy bugs or even some honeydew. We've talked in previous episodes. A lot of the insects that are feeding are going to feed and excrete honeydew, so we may be seeing some sticky substances. That's all signs of the insects that may be feeding inside now that we've got them in. So inspect them a little bit more. Wait on a weekend. That's somewhat nice. You can take everything outside, wash them down, water everything good, and then spray them down with the neem oil or insecticidal soap. See if that, and then bring them back inside.
Now, you mentioned earlier that's not necessarily a one and done thing. Something you're going to have to repeat.
Probably is a good idea to repeat. You probably won't get a full coverage, and maybe you have some eggs or something that where it doesn't quite control them. So come back every 2 weeks. Until we start seeing a definite decrease in the amount of honeydew we're seeing, or spider mite activity or aphid activity. So good idea to probably check them and at least plan on coming back in a couple weeks and doing it again. And then you're probably good for the season until you're ready to start taking them outside again.
Right.
Yeah. So just again to be aware of, kind of look around. When we bring plants from the outside in, we don't necessarily want to grow them a lot. So we're not going to fertilize indoor plants a lot. We're going to kind of do the minimum to keep them alive. If you want to put indoor lights in there, you can to keep them, a little more healthy. But we're trying to sustain them until we can get them back outside. At least I am when I'm looking at indoor plants.
Right.
So pretty simple. Just kind of scout and pest and look around. And if you got any questions on specific insects that you're seeing on the plants, snap a shot, send them to us, and we'll see if we can get them identified.
Well, bottom line, they're pretty easy to control.
Yeah.
And you don't have to use a nuclear option. You can use one of, like you said, the softer pesticides to take care of it.
Yeah, and some of the soft, like I mentioned aphids before, just bringing them indoors is gonna kind of slow them down.
Right.
They're not going to continue a very good life cycle indoors. So yep. Keep them in keep them in the back of your mind. Keep an eye on.
Be aware.
Be aware.
All right. Our plant of the week this week, again, we've kind of been talking about planting trees and shrubs, so we've been recommending some nice shrubbery to plant. This one is the Mugo Pine.
Good. That's a good evergreen.
It's really pretty, and it's a nice specimen. Lots of different sizes. And it comes in small, round, larger.
Poodle size, poodle shaped, different sizes, different
poodle,
balls.
No,
poodle, you don't like that kind of shape. But no, Mugo Pine's a good kind of a plant to put in our beds to kind of anchor everything.
Right.
And they'll last, 10, 15, 20 years. They do quite well.
They don't grow real fast, right?
They're kind of a slow grower. They're not going to be a fast grower, but again, shapes, sizes, all kinds out there in the nursery. It's winter time, so it's a good time to be planting these.
Right.
You can usually find them on sale in nurseries that work pretty good. Your favorite nursery should have them. Put them in the ground. It should work pretty well.
Well, and they're pretty forgiving. They grow well in a wide variety of pHs for the soil.
Mm-hmm.
Full sun. I mean, they
need full sun.
They do need full sun,
yeah.
And they're pretty drought resistant. I mean, in Oklahoma, we've got it's either feast or famine.
Wet or dry,
but they don't have. They'll get by with a little bit of water.
They can tolerate it. Like any pines, if they stay wet too long, if we put them in the wrong place, maybe we have a wet area from our irrigation system that maybe leaks.
Right.
That can take them out, so we got to be careful about that. But for the most part, a lot of they can range from dry to wetter soils to they need full sun. That statement was definitely true. But one thing we do wrong with pines or evergreens, we try to go in and prune too much. Say this thing has got a little out of hand, so we want to go in and prune like we normally do with our deciduous or our shrubs, and they don't take a pruning very well. How we control the size is when in the springtime, when they have the new growth, we call those candles. When those candles kind of start shooting out, we can go in and pinch those candles back, and that'll help kind of control that size to the way it was the previous year. So as the candles happen in the spring, pinch them back. That should help us control a little bit of the height. Don't go in and start pruning, because they won't ever pull out. It won't ever look normal. So we've got to control those by controlling those candles getting a size in there.
And I guess if you want to check one out and get an example, we've got a couple in our demonstration garden here at the extension.
Yeah, we've kind of, one of them's kind of got out of hand, and we're just kind of pulling it back in a little bit, but the other one really looks good too. It's a taller one that we've kind of got rounded off, and it again, good solid ones. They've been there 10 years plus, and not a lot of not a lot of issues with it.
Right. So good plant.
Yep, go check it out. Favorite nursery.
So it's cold outside.
It's getting there.
What do we want to do in our garden? Well, we don't necessarily have to go out in our garden to be doing stuff for our garden. We're talking about now's the time to be worrying about our tools.
Tools, we're all pretty, or at least I'm pretty notorious about, pruning, leaving my pruners and my shovels, and they'd stay dirty and unsharpened all winter, and then they get rusty, and then I may or may not have to replace them at the end of the season, or at the first of the season. But yeah, hanging up in our backyard, and we've got an itching, got a nice weekend or a good evening that's a nice outside. Be a good idea to go ahead and get those tools, look at them, sharpen them, clean the dirt off of them, clean the rust off of them, and then store them back again to get them throughout the wintertime.
Well, I've brought some of mine from home just for example. Of course, this would look a lot better if I didn't save it for an example for the show.
That's right.
It would be all cleaned and looking great.
You was saving it for that. That's good.
Yeah, but most of our shovels look like this after we used them,
Yeah.
and it'll deteriorate over time. So clean that dirt off. You can use a file, sand it down, and then maybe spray a little WD-40 on it, and just wipe it off with a rag.
Light coating of oil should help you, and then it won't. That dirt's going to attract moisture, so that moisture's going to attract rust. So, yep.
The same thing on our trowels.
Trowels, yep.
The trowels, clean that off of there. Again, a file, you can sharpen that. And the same thing on our pruners. This one needs a good cleaning and some oil and maybe a little file on there to help it.
Knock the edges off, kind of sharpen it up. And again, if we keep those pruners closed like that and we get a little moisture in there, it can rust. Right. And then we're out another $30-$40 on a new set of pruners. So little upfront area, little upfront things to do, and that can help us. And our shovels, you don't think about sharpening shovels, but you can run a file on those. It doesn't take long, and you'll be ready to go, good to go for the spring when we happen. So yeah,
take care of our tools, and they'll take care of us.
That's right. That's right. Some of the wood, wood handle could use an oiling to kind of moisten up that wood. So little things like that can help you along the way. And even lawnmowers. I mean, your lawnmower's kind of put up, and you're kind of itching to get out in the garden. Sharpen those blades. I mean, we mentioned that earlier on in episodes previous. But get in there and pull those blades off, sharpen them up, put them back on, then you're ready to go. That way,
in the spring when you have to mow, you can just go mow.
Go mow. Don't have to worry about it. Yeah. For sure. But yeah, it's a lot of things that we could be doing with our tools to help us later on and help extend that life of those tools. So
right.
Yep.
And outside, there's some stuff we could do outside. Clean up the debris, the garden debris.
That's right. Our leaves have kind of piled up along the. We talked about leaves in the last episode, but from the trees. But if leaves pile up from the wind, and we get a little bit of wind in the wintertime, maybe pull those back a little bit where it's not suffocating. Our pansies and maybe our bulbs that are going to start popping up before long. Get those out, mulch them in. That's all things to think of. And then mulch itself. You said you mulched last week again, so.
Right.
Good thing to do.
I mean, in the fall, we've had our mulch. In the spring, it's kind of deteriorated and starts to decompose. It doesn't hurt to put a little bit more fresh mulch on, especially like around my strawberries.
Yeah.
I need to remulch my strawberries because prep them for the winter so they'll survive.
Yeah.
So there's things we can do with that. And then hoses. I don't remember hoses or.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm calling the plumber.
I'm afraid I've got a couple hoses that's still attached, so I need to, I need to go out and take those off. That way we can drain on those frost freeze. And then the other thing's irrigation. Irrigation lines. If we still have water to our irrigation, if you're lucky enough to have a shutoff valve to your irrigation system, go shut that off, open those lines up. That'll help drain a little bit and help prevent us from doing our plumbing repairs every spring that we seem to always have. A little forethought helps us later on.
Right. So there's some things we could be doing that are going to help us in the long term. It's really preparation for next year.
Yeah, we're not far off. A couple months we'll be into the spring, and we'll start seeing bulbs pop up, and things are going to start happening pretty quick. But all of those prep stuff's going to help us later on.
Right. All right. So we'll move on to our questions of the week. This question, we get this fairly often. This question, it says, I've heard people. This is from Diane. I've heard people suggest putting ashes from the fireplace in my garden. Is that a good idea? Well, we love our fireplaces, and those ashes, you got to do something. But there's kind of this folklore that spreads around. Oh yeah, put those ashes in your garden. It's organic, it's natural. It's like, well, it's not necessarily a good thing to do.
Saying that, I remember back in my garden, in my grandpa's garden, he had they burnt wood all the time. So he had a corner of his garden that was just looked like all ash, and nothing would grow there. And I said, well, why don't you spread that out a little bit? And he said, well, it's too far or something. But what he did, he plowed it in, and it seemed fine. But he had that area where he built up too many ash, in those gardens, it wouldn't grow much. Right. So that ashes are potassium, I think, is all they have.
Primary
is the main thing they have in it. It kind of burns everything else. Not a lot of organic matter in an ash, fireplace ash, but and they're pretty high in pH, if I'm not mistaken.
I think 11 to 12 is the pH of so that's going to mess with your soil.
That's pretty high. If we're already high in the 7s and we add some more over time, that's going to raise that. So if we get into the 8s, we're going to be running into issues on pH. Our pHs normally need to be in the middle 6s, is kind of where we're at. Right. And soil tests are showing, from everybody doing everybody's soil tests, we're high already in pH. So probably wouldn't be good to add more pH to that, more higher pH to that. Right. So just be careful. Just be careful with that. Salts is another thing that they get in there. Salts tend to build up with ash. Salt's pretty easy to get out. We just got to water it, and a lot of rainfall usually will get the salt out. But as you add more, it adds into the soil. So just be careful. Be careful on that.
So the general rule, unless you've done a soil test, which we'll talk about in another episode, and know that you need to raise your pH, the general recommendation would be just don't.
Just stay away.
Just don't put it in your garden.
Just stay away. Let them dry. Let them cool down, and then throw them in the trash, and you're good to go.
All right. Myth dispelled here today.
Mostly.
All right. Our next question here comes from Ann. It says, I have a fair amount of Pampas grass. Is now a good time to divide? Pampas grass, I mean, these beautiful.
Great plant, great ornamental plant. It's a warm season plant, so it's going to grow during the spring and summer, and then freeze back in the frost, or at least turn brown in the wintertime. So the best time to do that would be in the spring when it starts shooting out new growth. You can see what survived, what hasn't. You can do it now. I mean, if you're itching to do something. I mean, last month I had the tractor out, so mine had got so big around, and I was only getting new growth around the outside and nothing on the inside. So I had to take the tractor and pop that stuff out. Right. I was going to get in and replant it. I never did. I piled it up in the back and went on. Again, you can buy a Pampas Grass pretty cheap, $5 a lot of times. So if you want to divide it, spring would be the ultimate time. It may or may not survive if you do it now, but what's it going to hurt? If you're wanting to go to get out in the garden, that's a good project to do. It more than likely will survive unless we get below 10s or 5s. But the ultimate time would be in the springtime.
Well, and plus a lot of us like to leave it like this all winter because this is a lot more interesting to look at than a sawed-off stub. These. Plus, it's going to provide some winter cover. Help protect those roots.
That's correct.
So you can cut that down in the spring and then divide it up. And as they grow, they'll tend to kind of die in the middle, right? They'll spread out if you don't maintain them well. So I guess if you're seeing them die in the middle, that'd be
it's
for sure
time to get in there to start cutting out,
them up.
Popping the whole thing up, and then pulling all the greens around, and then you've got 10 or 12 different plants you can plant. Right. But leave 1 or 2 there and it should be good to go. But yeah, it's a lot of good winter interest. I don't know if I'd mess with it at all, especially if you got one that's pretty. Right. Let it go, let it have that winter interest, and in the springtime, once it starts greening up, go with it, and it'll be good to start dividing at that point.
Well, there you go. And that brings us to the end this week.
That's it.
All right. Well, remember all the information that will pop up here at the end with how to contact us, phone numbers, email, et cetera, and then subscribe to that YouTube channel so you can get all the notices and see all the videos. But anyway, see you next time.
Keep those comments coming, keep those questions coming, and we'll see you next time.